Hello everyone, welcome back. So in the art community, we've been talking so much about this, the brush tip marker. With its flexible nib, it is so versatile, it blends smoothly and makes beautiful gradients. But what about this little guy, the chisel tip? Always overlooked, never loved. But today, hopefully, we will change that. Just happens to be that one of my favorite marker brands, Ohuhu, not sponsored, sent me their brand new series of markers called Kaala, with a special focus on the chisel nib. There is 4 different sets in this series with 150 colors in total. There is actually 168 markers in total, so some of the colors are reoccurring in multiple sets, just so you know. We have 2 bigger sets with 60 markers in each. We have illustration tones and landscape tones. Then we have 2 smaller sets with 24 markers in each. We got the skin tone set and basic tones. And each of the sets also comes with a colorless blender marker, color swatch cards that I've already filled in, and also these protective sheets that you put under the paper that you're drawing on to protect the surface underneath from the ink seeping through the paper. So this series is brand new. It is launching today actually, so if you'd like to check it out, there is a link in the description box below. So yeah, let's take a look at the actual marker. Also, I love this new packaging. It may just be for this new Kaala series, but I think it is a huge upgrade from the black fabric bags. I don't really mind the fabric bags, but it is harder to see what set it is. You will have to open it and look at the colors. Oh, this is the skin tone set. Also, there seems to be a little foam pad in the bottom of these boxes, so when you put the marker back in the case again, it doesn't make a lot of noises. Anyway, the marker, we got a brand new design, looks very fancy, and on the back of the barrel we have the color name, finally. So at the smaller end we got a fine bullet tip, and at the other end, you guessed it, the chisel nib. Oh, also I noticed that the gray line that is usually marking the bullet or brush tip is now marking the chisel nib. So apparently this new chisel tip is supposed to be longer and also a little finer, a little pointier. Looks very sharp. Actually, let's compare it to one of the old markers. It isn't really old, but it is older. So yeah, here we can clearly see that the new one is longer and pointier. This new nib is also supposed to be softer than the old ones to make it blend smoother. So yeah, let's just see what it feels like. So depending on which way you angle the chisel nib, you can get these very broad lines, but also very fine lines. Feels very nice, and the lines looks very smooth. So let's compare it to one of the old chisel nibs. So I feel like you can't really see that much different between the different chisel nibs. I feel like the lines are looking a little smoother on the new one, but I can tell that the new one does actually feel softer to draw with. It just feels like the nib is gliding more smoothly over the surface than the old one. So that might be because the nib is a little softer, so it gets better contact with the paper, which makes the lines smoother. Yeah, it feels great to draw with. Let's do a little blending test. Yeah, I think they both did really well. You can't really see that much difference between these blends. But again, it comes down to the feeling, how they feel to work with. The old chisel nib is much stiffer, while the new one is more flexible and soft, which makes the blending a little easier in that way. It just feels nicer working with the new ones. They just glide more smoothly over the surface, while the old one, they feel a little more textured, you know, like drawing with wood or something. Yeah, that are my thoughts about that. Finally, let's draw something. So to try out the markers, I thought it would be perfect to use one of my Patreon coloring pages. I made this page now for December and it is available for the highest tier over at my Patreon page if you would like to color it yourself. And I thought it was perfect not only because it is holiday themed, but also because it has a variety of bigger coloring areas and also smaller details, so that I can really try out this new chisel tip. So I basically just jump straight into the coloring. I usually don't have enough time to color my own coloring pages, even if I always say that I want to do so. So I am happy that I get a chance to at least color this one. I think it turned out so cute with a little kitty in its winter clothes and the bird friends helping with decorating the tree. Anyway, the marker, I think one question that some people might have is why? Who are these markers for and why focus on the chisel nib? According to Ohuhu, these markers are specially made for designers that with a sharper and softer nib, it should be easier to create various sketches and also more intricate designs and blend more smoothly for added dimension. So I guess with the broader nib, you can work quicker when you need to fill in larger areas, and since the nib is pointy, you can also do finer work. So basically you can do multiple tasks with the same nib, which might make you work more efficiently. But then some might argue that brush tips can do all of that too, since it is flexible, you can get broader and finer strokes. But what I found out about brush tips is that it isn't that great to fill in larger areas with, like for example a sky. The nib is moving around a lot since it is flexible, and it also tends to become a little dry when doing a lot of coloring at once. Brush tips are thinner at the end, so it isn't as saturated and the ink is disappearing more quickly from the point of the nib. So the color tend to turn out a little streaky when coloring bigger areas. If you want a more solid color, then the chisel nib is actually the best option in my opinion, because you get a more even application since the nib can hold a lot more ink, and there is also a bigger contact surface with the paper. You may still have to go over the area twice to get a fully saturated color, but it also depends on what kind of paper you are using. And of course, it is all about personal preferences, how you prefer to work and what experience you have with markers. Some people don't like brush tip markers, and then I think it's great that there is a better chisel tip option out there. Speaking of which, now that I've been using these markers a little more, let me tell you my thoughts about it. And as always, I'm sharing my own and honest opinion. So I did almost this whole piece using the chisel tip. I only used the bullet tip for some finer details like on the scarf and the lines on the candy canes, the bead string around the tree, and just a few things like that. And I have to say that I was positively surprised on how easy and natural it felt working with these chisel tips. I think since the new nib is pointier and a little softer, it makes it much easier to control, and I can reach into those narrow corners and around edges without having to switch to the finer bullet tip. So do we actually need this new chisel tip? I was a little, not really skeptical, since I know how important the chisel nib is in combination with a bullet tip, but I was a little hesitant to if there would actually be a big difference between this new nib and the old kind. And yes, I think the difference is big enough to call it an improvement. When using them in an illustration like this maybe, I don't think there is that much visible differences, but you can definitely feel the difference. The nib is very smooth and easy to work with, which I think is very important too, that you feel comfortable with the art supplies that you're using, that it feels natural to work with. So it was a very positive experience for me personally, and the fact that you can also work a lot faster and more efficient since you don't have to switch back and forth between the different nibs a lot is also a big plus in my book. So if you prefer working with bullet and chisel tipped kind of markers, I can really recommend these. Even if you're into brush tips, I think these could be a good complement depending on what kind of art you're making. So yeah, that are my thoughts. I hope it makes some kind of sense. Also, I hope you have been counting how many times I've been saying chisel tip or chisel nib. I'm expecting you to let me know in the comments. There are probably people that would do that. So I don't really have anything bad to say about these markers. I've been talking a lot about the Ohuhu markers in previous videos, and I've been mentioning different flaws that have actually been improved over the years. What I could say though is that these new markers are a little thicker than the regular ones, so at the beginning I thought they felt a little chunky to work with, but after a while I didn't really think of that, so I kind of got used to it. So overall, I am all for these markers. I love the new chisel nib and I find them to be a useful improvement. Wow, I've been talking a lot about these markers. Let's talk a little about this drawing. So I'm doing the finishing touches of this little holiday illustration. I tried to limit the color palette a little, but I don't know how well that worked. It turned out very colorful and I love that. I used a lot of different color tones to create more depth and dimension. For the tree alone, I think I used about 4 or 5 different greens to try to create a nice shading and also more contrast. Lastly, I added some texture and highlights with a white color pencil and also some snow in the background with a white Posca pen. So yeah, here it is. I'm so happy with how this one turned out. It turned out very colorful, very cheerful, and it was so much fun working with markers again. I don't really do that a lot anymore, but when I finally do, I super enjoy it. I hope you like it too and that you enjoy this video. Thank you so much Ohuhu for sending me this Kaala series to try out. Again, I can really recommend them if you're into the bullet chisel tip kind of markers. I think the new chisel nib is definitely an improvement. There is a link along with a 10% discount code on the Kaala series if you would like to check it out yourself. But yeah, that is all for now. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time. Keep drawing my happy cats. Bye!